This is the TSG Multimedia podcast for October of 2021. We're sponsored this month by Podomatic and the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. Thank you very much. I'm your host, John Abaticola, and I have some updates from last month, information about upcoming programs here on the channel, responses to viewer comments, and some cool catches in our Catch of the Month segment. Hey, if you like the programs on this channel, hit the thumbs up icon. I want to take a second to mention that you can help support my work by becoming a part of the TSG Train Crew. That's what I call our supporters on Patreon. It's as cheap as $2 a month, and it helps me bring the content you enjoy to the channel. You can also get yourself some branded merchandise by clicking on the links just below the video player on your computer screen. We have coffee mugs, phone cases, t-shirts, whatever you might want to show the world that you're one of the best viewers on YouTube when you go out chasing trains. September was a lot less busy than August, and I'll tell you that right off the bat, but we still managed to get out for another layout tour and an outing with the folks from the Daylight Division of the PCR that we did the PCR convention with last April. I'll get to that in a minute. Before I do, though, I want to take a second to tell you about a poll I ran on the channel last week. In the Community tab of the channel, which can be accessed by clicking this link on the main page, I asked which regularly scheduled Saturday morning content do you enjoy the most on this channel. As of the time of this recording, we have about 350 votes on that poll, and this is how it breaks down. The podcast got 3% of the vote, which is a little surprising to me considering this is the program on which I provide all the updates about what's going on with the channel. Layout tours got a whopping 64% of the vote, which isn't surprising, as the layout tours have become a big attraction here over the past couple of years. Chasing trains surprisingly received only 6% of the vote so far. I've always thought that the Chasing Trains fans were a vocal minority, and this kind of validates that thinking. One thing I'll say about that series is that the people who like it have always really liked it a lot, and I think that's pretty cool. Model Railroading with Jack Burgess got 10% of the vote. This is another surprise to me. You would think that with the number of views that series generates, it would score higher with the viewers. I know I do. Finally, Model Railroading 101 got 18% of the vote so far. Now I realize that 350 isn't a particularly large sample, especially when you consider that we have over 45,000 subscribers now. That's something else I was going to mention. We went over 45,000 subs this past Monday. Thanks very much for your support. I'm looking forward to eclipsing 50,000 in the first part of next year. That's going to be fun. Anyway, the last thing I want to mention about the poll is that there are some comments below that indicated some viewers don't have much preference and they just like all the content on the channel. Thanks for that, guys. So here's what happened since the last podcast. On September 15th, we went live with Michelle Campama for a call-in talk show. On this show, I reviewed a lot of the epic trip from August, including having other people who were part of the fun call in to share their experiences chasing trains around Colorado and New Mexico. That was a lot of fun. You can catch it on a replay if you missed us when we were live. On September 16th, we went to Mariposa to record a layout tour with Bob Jakl. I mentioned that I saw this layout about a year ago when we went out to Mariposa to record two other layout tours. It's a large two-rail O-scale layout in its own dedicated outbuilding on Bob's property. One of the things that makes it so special is that the whole family has been involved with it, even Bob's wife, Elizabeth. Something else we discovered while recording with Bob and his son Ed is that most, if not all of the things on the layout, from structures to rolling stock to locomotives, have some kind of history behind them. I think that's really cool. The layout tour barely scratches the surface of the personal connections hidden in this story. I told the Jakls that I'd love to return to document some of these stories someday. My guess is we could spend a year working on that kind of video and still not hear all the stories. I returned the next day to record some ride-along shots using my GoPro attached to a special flat car that they had used for a similar project in the past. The whole thing was a lot of fun, and I want to thank the Jakls for sharing their story with us. That layout tour will be out sometime early next year, most likely, but the TSG Train Crew will see it as soon as I'm done editing it. At any rate, that same afternoon, we went to see another layout in the area. This one is owned by Ruth and Tom Davis. It's a 3-rail O-scale layout, or O-gauge as many call it. It's a very nicely done layout and a school portable. The idea for this visit was to meet Ruth and Tom and get an idea of what the layout is like, so that when we return to make a video about it in the future, we'll know what we're up against ahead of time. On Saturday the 18th, there was an open house at Bob's Layout, as well as Glenn Sutherland's Sierra 1923 layout that we featured here on the channel earlier this year. Sydney and I helped out at Glenn's layout because we were staying with Glenn and his wife Kathy for the duration of our visit. Helping, at least for me, basically consisted of running trains on the layout. Darn, that's really hard work. I'm happy to report, though, that Glenn's layout runs exceptionally well. Not a single derailment or problem the whole time I was working. The open houses were done in conjunction with what I'm going to call the after party for the PCR convention that we helped with back in April. I mentioned this convention at the top of the program. The event organizers arranged a nighttime barbecue and ride at the Yosemite Mountain Sugar Pine Railroad in Fish Camp. That event also included a tour of their engine house by Scott McGee, whose knowledge of the history of the railroad and its surrounding history is very impressive. As a matter of fact, Scott presented the history of the Madera Sugar Pine Lumber Company for the PCR convention and for the national convention we had last July. That's how I met him. I recorded with him and edited the presentation for both conventions. He shared a ton of interesting history about the railroad and a bunch of the artifacts in the shop. Something tells me that he barely scratched the surface of what he could have told us, too. The ride that evening was behind their 3-truck Shay number 10, and it included nighttime running under a full moon. That alone made the trip worthwhile. Besides all the great trainee stuff that day, I think the real highlight was meeting a whole bunch of people in person that we had only up to that point worked with virtually. And what a great bunch of people, too. I'm really looking forward to returning to the Yosemite Mountain Sugar Pine Railroad again sometime in the future to document their operations and history in depth. I'm not sure when that will happen, but my guess is sometime next year. So the next day we returned home, and I want to take a minute to thank Kathy and Glenn for hosting us on that little excursion. We had a great time just hanging out and laughing, and we really look forward to doing it again whenever the chance presents itself. So thank you so much, Glenn and Kathy. Aside from that quick little jaunt out to the Mariposa area, there were some meetings and other calls in preparation for a future event. I'm very excited about this too, because we're planning to put on a hybrid event that some people have said can't be done. No spoilers now, though. I'll let you know when I have more to tell you about that. That brings us up to date as far as what I've been up to. This month, I'll be working on another layout tour. This one is going to be about the Santa Cruz Northern. If you've paid any attention to Bay Area layouts, that name should sound familiar because it belongs to Jim Providenza. I met Jim in person at a SIG meet a few years ago. As a matter of fact, he appears on the video I did about that event. I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say, as he is heavily involved with both the Operations Special Interest Group and the Layout Design SIG as well. That should be a great time. I'm also going to be meeting up with Jack Burgess this month to record the next episode of his series, Model Railroading with Jack Burgess. That's always a lot of laughs when we get together. I don't have any specific viewer comments to respond to this month, but I do want to mention that the last few layout tour programs that came out on the channel are still being viewed a lot, and they're getting a lot of really great comments as well. Another video I want to mention that you should check out if you haven't seen it yet is the one from last weekend, where my friend Robin Gilstrom showed off his N-scale McKean car. I gotta tell you, when Robin told me he was ready to show off that project on a video, I was pretty excited, because we've kind of followed that project for about the last 3 years or so. And it's what I always say, something that you don't see every day. And now for this month's Catch of the Month segment. The first couple shots come from RJ Pieper. I've been mispronouncing RJ's last name for 2 years as Piper. Now that I got it sorted, let's look at these photos. The first one is of Union Pacific 4014. You might have heard of that locomotive. It's in this shot. It's crossing the Green River in Wyoming on September 30th of 2019. This photo also won an award at the Professional Photographers Association exhibition, which RJ also shared with me. I think that's pretty cool, and congratulations, RJ. That's some awesome work right there. The other shot from RJ is this one of UP's Western Pacific Heritage Unit, number 1983 in Hallville, Wyoming. The next catch of the month comes from longtime viewer Drew Struck of Sacramento. He caught the westbound California Zephyr with some private cars on the back of the train. The next catches come from Robert Darby, who was at a place called Train Mountain in Chiloquin, Oregon. I've been to Chiloquin, but I didn't get to Train Mountain. That's one of those places on my list to visit one of these days. At any rate, Robert shared this run-by at a place called Clyde on Train Mountain, as well as a couple photos. This one from the station at Clyde, and these shots from Crane. Robert said the engineer on that train is over 90 years old. Our last catch of the month is a modeling project from Logan Thurman, who's working on this brass locomotive with the end goal of making it look like the original Northern Pacific 1934. I don't think you can tell from the photos, but this is a 484, and I think it's already looking a lot like the photos of this class of locomotive I saw when I looked it up on the internet. Brass models are a whole different kind of project. I hope Logan will share more progress as it comes along. If you have a catch you'd like to share, please email it to podcast@tsgmultimedia.com. Be sure you own the photo and let me know the what's, whens, and wheres of the shots you want to share. Now for this month's program schedule. The fourth quarter of the year, that's October, November, and December, always tends to be a bit busier as far as views go, so I'm working hard to add some additional content on as many Wednesdays as I can. So here's what we have. On October 6th, that's this coming Wednesday, I have something different. It's the first in a series I'm developing to help everyone get more from their subscription to this channel. It'll cover how to access playlists and what's in the playlists on this channel. If you're a content creator, this might help you organize your channel as well. Then on October 8th, we have a product spotlight. On October 9th, it's our next layout tour, the Hetch Hetchy in black and white with Steve Rediker. This is one of my favorite layouts, and Steve's a great guy, so don't miss it. On the following Wednesday, that's October 13th, we have the return of High Plains Railroad Preservation with Mike Pannell. In this episode, Mike shows us the recently completed Denver Trolley .04, as well as the oldest known Union Pacific caboose in existence. On Friday, October 15th, it's the return of N-Scale Friday. On October 16th, we have the next episode of Chasing Trains, about the epic trip of 2021. It's part 2, and it features the part of the trip that takes us from Utah all the way to Colorado. On October 20th at 4 p.m., I'll be joined by my co-host Michelle Kempema for our monthly live call-in show. I don't know what Michelle has in mind for that, but I can tell you that she's been on an epic trip of her own over the past couple weeks, and I'm sure I'll be asking her about that. On Friday, the 22nd, we have another product spotlight. Then, on October 23rd, it's the return of Model Railroading with Jack Burgess. We haven't recorded this episode yet, but I can tell you that Jack plans to talk about layout design concepts in this episode. It will definitely be worth checking out. On Wednesday, October 27th, I'll be sharing a classic TSG release that came out on DVD in 2008 called A Day at Pinole. It was only 13 years ago, but a lot of the equipment shown on that program is already no longer seen on the rails. On October 28th, it's our top secret producer's birthday. So send flowers and money to me and I'll give it to her. On October 29th, we have another product spotlight. And finally, on October 30th, that's right, October has 5 Saturdays this month, it's the next episode of TSG Live Model Railroading. In this episode, we'll have Paul Deese on hand as we present his clinic about tuning up your rolling stock. Paul will be answering questions in our live chat during the clinic, and we'll have a discussion afterwards, just like we always do on these programs. That's a lot of programs for this month, and I'm sure you understand now why I look tired. Even without an epic trip, there's been a lot of editing to do. I have a list of the TSG Train Crew members who support the work I do here that I want to share with you. I do this every month now as a way to thank them and as a way to remind you that all Train Crew members enjoy early 4K ultra high definition and ad-free access to the featured Saturday programs, usually weeks before those programs get published to the channel. If you can spare $2 a month or more, you're also invited to join the crew by visiting patreon.com/TSG Multimedia. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.